Welcome to the unknown history of Walton County, of which our community is one with Native people.
Hi, my name is Ann Tucker, and I am current chairwoman of the Muscogee Nation of Florida, located in Bruce. Muscogee Nation was a loose family grouping after the removal, and our documentation of being here is with the Spanish. Because when we were here over by Choctawhatchee's reservation in what is now Liberty County and Calhoun County, that's where the Spanish had come in to do a census roll. So we're on that one. And then in Walton County, by the 1860 census, we're here in Walton County. And the reason that this happened was when the Spanish government left and the United States is now a country came into Florida. Well, we had already been here, and Andrew Jackson came in as the governor, which made it very unpleasant for Indian people living in the area. So we simply crossed from the river up into Northern Alabama, which is less than 90 miles away. And we lived there until it was safe to leave, which started happening around the Civil War. My people always told me the way we didn't get removed, we would move at night. Some of us ended up in Oklahoma, but the bulk of our families here, we didn't want to go to Oklahoma, and we stayed in our homeland. The removal, after the immigrants started increasing, the United States had a war, and they really couldn't protect what was the border of what was called the Creek Confederacy. And the Creek Confederacy was an amalgamation of towns. At one point, there were 187 towns. So with the influx of immigrants, you're finding some of the richest growing land in the United States. And there was no way to protect the border that was the tribal border. They would actually give licenses to Scotch-Irish and Scottish traders so that they could come into Indian country. But what started happening was the immigrants started coming in, and it caused a really hostile relationship. The Indian Removal Act affected all the tribes that were in the Southeast, and the plan was to get us over to Oklahoma so that we would not be in the way of those wanting to come into the plantations. So that's where the removal was. Half of the population died. They set them in a place where there were already indigenous people. So there was a sort of a cultural amalgamation that happened with removal in Oklahoma. We didn't go. So our job here was to remain quiet enough that we didn't cause people to be too much aware. And I think we still live that way. In 1853, when Florida made it illegal to be Indian, it was then a matter of suddenly everybody becomes white, or they judge you on sight. So, because there was white and there was colored, as they called it, which was very offensive. But that happened in 1853. We couldn't bear arms. We couldn't trade in 1850s. So what this was effectively doing was starving us to death, so we had to remove. I think the last removal in Florida was around 1880s. So even though we were here, and even though we were safe, we're not safe because you're still removing in 1887. And with my grandmother, that's recent time. She was born in 1898. So our history, even though people say, oh, that was so long ago, no, that's recent history. It's recent history in your ancestors and in the stories that they tell you on how we survived. And here, we really haven't shared that history very much. We do sometimes when we're asked, but we're just a quiet people, and this is how we live. And we live in a community structure. We grew up together. We married each other, buried each other, and managed to continue that way. So when the anthropologists first came in and talked to my great aunt, she had a man that was, I think, her cousin, her nephew, and her stepfather or something all combined. It was 3 places where the anthropologist had a really interesting time working how our trees work, how our genealogical tree works. We couldn't be identified as Indian. We can only be identified as white or black. So with this tribe and not having sovereign rights, when we applied to the Bureau of Indian Affairs for federal recognition, and we are actively in their process, the first question was, are you Indian? Well, you don't have white paper to show it, and that's what they want, this white government paper. So they reorganized the Bureau in 1947 and said, well, we're going to pay for the land around Montgomery. And my great-grandfather said, well, that's where we lived. So it started a movement of attempting to reclaim some of this property that was never paid for and taken during removal. And they called it the Land Claim Settlements for the Treaty of Fort Jackson, which was one of the last treaties that was signed here to remove the last of the idiots. So it ended up that it had to go to court. And in court, they finally said, yes, these are Indians. We've made a mistake. We did not kill and remove them all. So when Congress finally appropriated the money, which was by now 1970, 1968, 1969, but as the rules change, and they change regularly, it took us until last year on the genealogical side of the data. And we have almost 20,000 names of the data that we've had to uncover. When we came here, we had always lived on the Choctawhatchee River. There have been times that with the movement over in Calhoun County, because we were turpentine people and logging people, we followed the trade over there, and we're near the Appalachia. But here, in this part of the Choctawhatchee River, the Coshawta were on one side, the Coshawta now in Louisiana, and we were on the other side. And I think that we're kind of a mix of the Euchees and of the Coshawta, because we had been together many years, and I think our language is quite similar. The way we hunted and fished is very similar. So when we came here, there really wasn't anything here. And a man by the name of William Josiah, who was a medicine man, he's a Mason, and he was a leader, he decided that we needed education to live here. He said, if we do not have education, we will not be able to survive. So he built a one-room schoolhouse, and the kids got taught at the normal school, and they went to Definier to learn how to teach. And then that teacher taught my mom. It was her cousin, and he taught her, so that she started teaching here at age 18. I think he taught all of the county, but she would teach, and then in the wintertime, and then in the summertime, she would catch the Greyhound bus over to FSU, which at the time was a women's teachers college, and that's where she would go to school in the summertime to get her degrees so that she was legally teaching. But other than that, she was teaching anyway in the school. It was basically an Indian school. And it was built, oh gosh, it goes back to the 1880s. The building was hit with a tornado when the sound was cut in Destin. I think in 1924, something like that. It might have been later than that. But it left the foundation. It took the school. It took the church. And there were turpentine families now living here. So this became a 3-room schoolhouse. And it was completed with the CCC programs of Roosevelt. And it was a school until civil rights and the breaking up of segregation, 1957, at which time we were busted free for our Walton County. And the school building was given to the women because the women owned the property. So the county gave it to women for $10, and we asked for it for $10. And then the women's club turned it over to the tribal government for $10. This was in the late 1990s. And we do $10 because when the bounty went out on us in 1853, it was $10 a new yen dead or alive. So we maintained the building for $10. And, when you've got two cultures blending together and you're not wanted, you're trying to figure out how to be wanted and how you have to live here. And that's by creating a church, which ran counter to the old ceremonies. But in 1912, we got a church. And it turned out the old man Diamond Joe had written to all kinds of religions, but the Methodists showed up. They were working with Indians, so everybody became a Methodist. And that 1912 roll is our baseline roll for federal recognition because it identifies the families here. And then with the land claim settlements, they are Indian families. So that's how we've worked this situation. We've been in the recognition process in various forms for over 70 years, and I'm the third leader working with us. And it has been an interesting journey. Well, you rode 6 miles on the river, maybe a mile into a road, but you would go by sloughs. Mm-hmm. So, like, out into the thicket back in here is Mossy Bay, which would cut into the Choctawhatchee. So when we were working the water, which is how we travel primarily, we would use bateaus, half boats that were really shallow, and then we would have an oar on one end and a pole on the other that you could either pour or you could sculpt boat. In here we have a dugout canoe that is very, very old. We have the last bateau hand built, and we have an oar. So we've been very lucky that some of the people who live here are trying to help preserve what's going to be left of us here. The world is changing. This place is changing. And the reason the tribe started turning the school into a museum was in hopes that people will know we were here. Because 50 years from now, where's their history going to be? You knock things down, we don't preserve it, but then you want to know who lived here. If I could get a board together, which is my next order of business, is getting a good board to help us make the repairs on this building at Neeson and also to expand our collections. And ultimately, we'll have stories from our people, from our community histories that are on interactive devices so that you can listen to the history and kids can come in and work their interactive devices on it. I'm hoping that it teaches the children about this place, about how we lived, about the river, about things that should be protected. We're building dioramas now to show you what the grounds look like, and we still have the ceremonies. So the shakers that the women use when we do our dances, those are some of my favorite things. We have a pair of deer toes coming in when the turtles got scarce, which is what they were originally made of. We moved to kid cans, shake wealth, evaporated milk cans. And so, and also there's deer toes that you can use. They make a different sound, but that sound becomes our music. So when we're doing ceremonies, people say, oh, are you going to have a powwow and do this and that? No, we're not. We sing at ceremony. That's when our songs come out. And that's when we maintain our traditions. That's the old religion. The what we call the ceremonial grounds was the center of government before 1924, when the Bureau said you'll get a constitution and become like us. I guess the question I get a lot is, how did we get here? How did we end up in Bruce? And it's interesting as we've explored through the history records where we've been and what we did. But when the Civil War broke out, we determined that this was not our war, and the tribal government, the massive government who had removed to Oklahoma, determined that they would support the Confederacy. We had the head of the family died in the war, and Diamond Joe, his father, he had a dream that said, move to Bruce, move to this place. And they knew where they were coming, because you can't find this place if you don't know where you're coming. Back to where Sam Story's people were, we came in at Story's Landing. This was a place we knew, it was a place we'd been. And so they came in wagons. It was 3 brothers and your wives, and a woman and one of their sisters and her husband. They had all married brothers and sisters from the same family. So they came in here by wagon. And we have an example of the wagon, and set up building the typical wattle buildings, and worked with log cabins, because we were loggers. So that's how the industry they found they could live in and work with was the logging foundations, because a lot of the lumbies did the same thing. You could just work in the woods and not be known. Plus, it was something that navigating the waters we knew how to do. What had happened to the woman of the husband when she had been a child, she was left owner near Bartram's trading post up in Alabama. It was along the Muscogee River. And at that time, when they were beginning to remove, and it was beginning to be hostile, all the people would come in, the tribal people would come in, and they would shad fish in that river. And they would leave their children on the trade routes in hopes that they would get picked up. So she was about 4 years old. She did not speak English. She spoke native language, usually Choctaw language. And a trader found her named English, John English, and he brought her home. And that's how she could read and write. She learned from the Bible. So when you're having to remove from a situation, especially one that is as hostile as the Indian removal, the ability to read and write can really change your abilities to survive. We came into Florida just as it was getting into statehood, and we were able to live here because the river's on one side of us and Black Creek's on the other side of us, and West Bay's, behind us, and the Gulf, we were surrounded by water. It was real hard to get here. So when I was at the Senate hearings and House hearings, and they said, how did they come and visit you? Well, they didn't. If we didn't know them, they didn't make it across the river. We had hollowed out cypress trees, and that's where they would keep an eye on who was coming and going. It also kept us safe regionally. I mean, there's reasons that you have to do the things you do. So we could read and write. We knew pretty much where the government was concentrating the removal. So those wagons would move at night, and we'd find safe haven. When you are not a federally recognized tribe, you need to have something as an indigenous person identifying you. Luckily, with the land claim settlements, we had letters from the Department of the Interior so that we could identify, but that didn't get us federally recognized. The leader of the community, J.J. Ward, thought that if he got that genealogical done, that we would be recognized as people. But it's not that easy. You have to go into the community, into the government, and there's a lot of different phases of it. So we've been working actively. The Florida Tribe of Creek Indian people was formalized in 1978. That became an organization with a name. Okay, we got a name. Otherwise, we were JJ's Budgie and Bruce. And that's really not a name that we want to use. So the Florida Tribe was in 1978. The members pretty much had come from Firestone, the Secretary of State, and from under the tenure of Bob Graham. And the Florida Tribe set up the Constitution, managed to write the Constitution and codes, and we made a lot of ground in it. But what it came down to acceptable genealogical information for the Bureau. And that becomes a very difficult topic to deal with. So from Florida Tribe, we changed our name in 2000 to Muscogee Nation of Florida. We had turned in a petition. We had moved into the phase 1, and we didn't want a name called Florida Tribe of Eastern Creeks. We wanted it more in our language, Muscogee Nation of Florida. And we called it a nation because it was an amalgamation of people that fled into Florida during the removal time. So there's many different towns represented across the Panhandle. And we're not all alike. We're not all the same people. In Bruce's case, in our case here, because we were quiet, because we were silent, because we tried our best to fit in, we were able to stay here and remain unknown, basically. We never incorporated. So everybody knows Bruce is here, but Bruce isn't incorporated. We're still on well water. We still cook the same foods that we cooked 100 years ago. Not too much has changed here. What's really changing is the world around us. We're pretty stable in who we probably are. Our dream for the future is the sovereignty. Sovereignty opens up health insurance. It opens up education, better housing. It allows us to be an 8A contractor so that, if you need Black Hawk helicopter parts, they can be done on a tribal reservation. Those are the benefits to it. Most people look at it and go, "Oh, we're going to have a casino." That's not what this is about. This is about a government relationship with the United States agent, and the agent was determined to be the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we have been in this process for 40 years. We've been suspended because they had internal issues. We've been extended because their administration changed, because you're dealing with a change in government. Every 4 years, it can change. So now you're having to restart to educate whoever comes in to try to tell them this is who we are. And it becomes hard. So the council decided to freeze the elections, just freeze it all until we could get through, because when we changed chairs, then we had that gap going on. And that hostility, defense, it kind of like, you lost your position and this one's in charge. So before I became chair, we had frozen the elections. And the man who was running it was John Thomas. And when John passed, they started looking around the table, and I was the young one at the time. And I had also been working for the tribe as an oral historian and anthropologist off and on since the 70s. So I got elected, and it wasn't elected because I wanted to be. It was because my great aunt decided she wasn't going to give it a rest until I came back. So at the time, I had been living in Maryland for a year, and I finally told my husband, they're not going to back off. I'm going to have to come down and serve the office of chair. It is one. It's about service to your people. It's not about which casino can I build. It's about having that respect and that understanding and the idea that you have to serve. It was given to me when I was 4 years old. I was at a meeting in this very room, and I was sitting against the door. I was the only child at the meeting, and that was the beginning of my being trained in the things that I now know. When you want to look up our history, and we tried to do a brief so that it explains who we are. It has pictures and maps, and it's on our website, www.mnof.com. And it gives them just a look at who we are. We don't update the website. I'll just be honest with you. We are going to get better at this, but when you're in a recognition process, it is a volatile process. And so you don't find our names out there, and you don't know that, yes, we've just had one positive determination, because we don't tell people. We just keep our heads down and keep our minds on our activities. If you want to get in contact with us, our email is immunof278@gmail.com. And we have a secretary that will check your emails, and we're always happy to welcome you. I know you probably don't know that, since we are kind of a hidden people, but we like visitors, and we like educating. And this museum is just an attempt to educate. And it was, for me, is dedicated to people like my mom, who managed to teach in the hardest of times. But you can reach us by email. If you want a phone, it's 850-835-2078. That's our phone number. And we were happy to, as I said, set up a tour for you or visit with you. For more videos that are similar to this on all the hidden people of the county, you can go to the website, which is the Coastal British Library, and look at their website for different stories. In our case, you'll find some stories that we were the river people. We managed tugboats. We managed to be steamboats. So the Bruce and the Fritz
were captained
by members of our tribe. So I think we have an interesting history. It's a history that goes into Walton County as the original county and how we originally lived. And I think that we are some of the last people that remember this. So it's something that we're trying to make as a gift for the future.